In my initial banlist reaction video, I was really excited for the coming format because I honestly believed it would be very similar to either mid 2014, which was hat format, or late 2016 when Blue Eyes and Metal Foes were sort of the best decks. And the reason I thought it was going to be like that is because after the banlist, my prediction was that none of the decks would be too overpowering. I really thought that Magicians were hit hard enough to not be as good anymore. I thought their boards weren't going to be as consistent. They also have to expend a lot more resources to make their boards. I thought Spirals would just go away completely. They didn't quite go away completely, by the way, but they did pretty much go away completely. I thought Trickstars, while a lot of people thought they'd be the best deck coming out of the ban list just because nothing got hit, Trickstars just have a lot of inherent flaws. I mean, as Ryan Levine put it, I think he's a multiple YCS champ. He might just have won his first YCS, so he's topped a lot of events. He put it that a strategy that loses to a normal summoned 1900 attack monster simply can't be the best deck, and I have to agree. I don't think Trickstars are actually that good. They can be kind of annoying, and sometimes they get the Droll combo off, but overall, Trickstars I don't think are the best deck. I think Magicians are probably just by default the best deck, but nothing is like overpowering. I think that's awesome. So there's a lot of different decks you can play right now. That's something that I observed not only while I was playing in my own regional last weekend, just looking around at the tables. It's like every single table I looked at, there was like a different matchup happening. It was so crazy. But also, if you just look at the regional topping results, tons of decks topped over that first weekend. And I know it's the first weekend, so people haven't quite figured out the format. But I really do believe, even after YCS Atlanta, which, by the way, when you're seeing this video, I'll either be on a plane to YCS Atlanta or I'll be at the convention center when this goes up, just depending on when you watch it. But I really think even after YCS Atlanta, we are still going to be in a fairly open format. And while as the weeks go on here, I'm sure people will figure things out to sort of solve the format. I think we do have a couple weeks, if not a month, where people don't know what they're doing quite yet. And that leaves me in a weird spot. It's exciting because it means I can play basically whatever I want to and at least be semi-successful. But it also means that the bad news is I can play anything I want to and be somewhat successful. So why is that a good and a bad thing? Well, it's a good thing because it doesn't make me restricted as a player to play a certain strategy. I feel like almost any strategy is viable right now. However, it's a bad thing because it means I can't sort of narrow down my choices. It's really difficult deciding on what deck to play when almost any deck is viable. I mean, think of last format, it's like anytime I would sort of be stuck between two decks, I'd be like, okay, which one can beat Spiral Sleeper going second better? And that would then make my choice a lot clearer. But right now, there's not like any super crazy boards that you have to face. Probably the most like standard one that Magicians make is with Vortex Dragon and then one other negation or like a Tornado Dragon. But that's really like the most oppressive board. The Spiral boards simply aren't consistent enough to go off. Even the really good Dinosaur boards are just like Winda and then the Overtext guy. So there aren't any really like Spiral Sleeper plus Firewall plus Trigate Wizard. There's nothing like that anymore, which I think is pretty cool. But anyway, in this video, not I've rambled on enough, I just want to talk about the 3 decks that I'm going to take to YTS Atlanta and then decide on Friday night which one I want to play. I've been testing all 3 pretty much the entire like format so far since it's been announced, and I think they're all viable in their own right, but I'm going to talk about their pros and their cons. So I did a poll about this the other day, and it actually got like thousands of results, which is kind of funny. You guys seem really passionate about what deck that I scrub out of YCS Atlanta with. I as well. I think it's a pretty fun topic to talk about. And but the poll wasn't like super oppressive for any of the decks. It seemed like everyone was pretty interested in one of them. So it wasn't like one had like 70 or 80% of the clicks or whatever, the votes. So yeah, let's talk about these 3. So the first one I want to talk about is Zodiac FA. This is a deck that I've played not only in the first format or the first weekend of the new format, but also in the last weekend of the previous format. I have a lot of experience with Zodiac FA. Obviously, I've been playtesting them a ton, and I do think I'm getting better and better with the deck, and it's really good. It has a lot of good combo potential, and I think that one thing that I like about Zodiac FAs and just like about decks in general is that Zodiac FAs, like a lot of good decks, have sort of inevitability. It gets to a point when you have 2 Side-Frame Lord Omegas on the board, and you're recycling Test Run and Pit Stop every single turn, and you got an Auto Navigator engraved, and you get to a point where you can't lose. I mean, like, technically you can. Your opponent could open, like, Regeki or Ross Fear Mode or something. But in general, it just gets to a point where you have way too many effects for any deck to deal with. And a lot of the decks that I like to play, and a lot of the best decks in the game, get to this point where they have so many cards at their disposal that no matter how many counters you have, as long as the person that's piloting the deck actually makes the correct plays, they pretty much can't lose. And I love that about FAs. What I don't like about FAs is that you can draw some unplayable hands. People ask me what the worst hands are. The worst hands are either like 2 or just like all level 4 monsters and like a barrage. That's pretty bad. All field spells with nothing to destroy them is pretty bad. That's probably the most common bad hand, is just drawing like 3 field spells and a terraforming and a cock-a-doodle-doo. That doesn't really do anything. You can also just draw tuners. That's why I played Totem Bird, just in case I draw the cock-a-doodle-doo and an auto navigator and nothing else. So those hands are all sort of bad hands, but in general, I think that deck's really good. It has a good going first feel that has some good anti-meta aspects of it with Hang On Mock and stuff like that. Cypher Lord Omega is obviously a really good card. So I think that one's, I mean, it's a high choice. It's the one that I've played most recently. I also played on live stream, and the deck that I'm very interested in is Dinosaur Shadalls. Now, I know a lot of people play their own builds of it, but I'm kind of going off of this one. I'll put an image on the screen. There's one that topped the regional that I went to last weekend. It's pretty unique. It solves a lot of my issues with Dinosaur Shadalls. I feel like when you look at a lot of dinosaur lists, and even when I was playing dinosaurs back at the last WCQ, my list had these problems. There's so many cards you just don't want to draw. There's the Jirac Tuner. Some people are even playing the level 3 Jirac Tuner as well. Even really Baby Ceratosaurus, if you don't have a way to destroy it, it's really bad. That's kind of in the same vein as like the volcanic cards. You don't want to draw Shell or Scattershot without a Blaze Accelerator reload, and you don't want to draw the Blaze Accelerator reload without the Shell or Scattershot. So it leads to a lot of awkward hands. And I think dinosaurs can have those. I think if you open like double Baby Ceratosaurus, Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, and Dragonic Diagram, and like a Terraforming, boy, that hand's really good unless your opponent happens to have an Ash and an Ogre, in which case you lose the game instantly because now you have 2 level 2 monsters that don't do anything. There's just a lot of cards that you don't want to draw, but I think the list that topped that regional solved a lot of those issues. However, that list is pretty normal summon reliant, and it definitely can still draw bad hands. Dinosaurs, even if you cut the Baby Cerasauruses, even if you cut the Jiracs, they can have some bad hands, and it's just the way the deck is designed. It's designed to have raw power, and unlike FAs, I don't feel like dinosaurs have inevitability. I feel like a lot of times they sort of throw everything on the board. They have these huge monsters, but if your opponent manages to kill them, you really don't have a lot of recovery, especially with Miscellaneousaurus now limited. And actually, the list that top didn't even play Miscellaneousaurus because there's no level 1 tuners to summon, there's no level 2 monsters to summon, there's only the level 4 guys. So they can make some really crazy boards, they can break some really crazy boards, but after that like initial turn or two, they really can't recover. They just don't have that much recovery options, which I think is like the biggest issue with dinosaurs for me personally. Double Evolution Pill is an incredible card, however, it is only 1 summon per turn. You only have the 3 double evolution pills. You can only activate them once per turn. That's like the big comeback card, and even then it's not like that big of comeback, but I think it's still good. So you can see my issue with dinosaurs and also the benefits of them. The benefits of them is that they can make some crazy boards, and also they're probably the best deck of the format at taking apart boards. If you draw a hand like Shadal Fusion and Armageddonite, or even like Shadal Fusion Overraptor, any combination of cards that can get you to a Shadal Fusion monster and then Overtext, it's pretty ridiculous, and it can break boards, even the best boards, going second, and I think that's awesome. However, when I go first with it, and then like I even if you stack your deck in your test hands to see like what the best hand possible is, it doesn't end with like that many crazy things. It usually at most will end with like a Winda and then an Overtext. That's like the best opening hand, or like a Rafflesia and an Overtext something, and it's just like, it's not enough. It doesn't feel unfair enough, which I think that always confuses casual players when I say that, but really the best decks are going to be, they're going to have some unfair aspects of them. That's what makes them good. That's what makes them better than other decks. Anyway, the last deck is Paleozoic Frogs. So many of you know that I've been playing this deck for a while. That was my deck of choice pretty much during the entire time Spirals were played. I like that deck for a lot of reasons. The biggest reason I like that deck is not so much to do with the actual trap cards. I mean, it's cool that we have 3 bottomless, and it's cool that we have Solemn Judgment and stuff, and the Paleozoic cards themselves are a lot better now that Spiral Resort is out of the game. But the real reason I like Paleozoic frogs, and the real reason that most people play Paleozoic frogs, is simply because of Totally Awesome. Totally Awesome is just one of the most ridiculous Exceed monsters in the entire game. Even after like a year or two of it being out, it is still so crazy. It is, I don't know if it's an unfair card, but it certainly doesn't feel fair when you're going against a Totally Awesome. I mean, I can have one Totally Awesome and one lone back row, and my opponent is still freaking out that I opened the Toad. And it's just crazy. No card has been able to make my opponents as angry as Totally Awesome. I mean, I've done like the Sky Scourge and Aurelis combo, like first turn, get rid of their entire hand. They're usually not even mad at me, or at least as not as mad as summoning Toad against them. It's just crazy. You summon that card, people go on tilt instantly. But Totally Awesome and frogs in general have an extremely good matchup against Trickstars. It's basically an auto win, and that's really appealing to me. It also has a good matchup against Dinosaurs. Any deck that really can't deal with a lot of back row, Toad is going to have a great matchup again, just because it can get your opponent to a simplified game state, and then you have so much momentum. So going back to that inevitability thing, frogs absolutely do have that. It gets to a point where you can summon a whole bunch of stuff in one turn. You can do the double Mistar Boy and then one Toad OTK. That's a pretty common OTK. You just get to the point where you have like 4 Paleozoics in graveyard, you have a full back row, and you have multiple Ronin Totems, and you just can't lose, and I like that a lot about frogs. The big problem with frogs is obviously going second is really rough when like 40% or not 40%, like I guess it'd be like, if let's say like 30 of the 40 cards in your deck are trap cards, it's going to be pretty tough going second. And sometimes you can still dismantle the board, but sometimes your opponent just gets so far ahead that it's way too difficult. So that can be rough. And then I think the bigger issue is the deck's just too inconsistent. It's definitely the most inconsistent of the 3 decks on this list. You only had those 3 copies of Swap Frog, and even if we're counting Dupe Frog as like a Swap Frog replacement, that's only 6 like starter cards, and Dupe Frog really isn't a starter because you just set it and pass. But that's only like 6 good monsters to open. A lot of times, I mean, I really mean a lot of times, in Frog Paleozoics, when you go first, you're just setting 3 back row and passing. That's like the most standard open hand, no matter how you build the deck, because there just aren't ways to search Swap Frog. It's really rough. So a lot of times you're just summoning like a Dupe Frog in defense position, you set it, and then you pass, and you hope your opponent doesn't OTK you, and you hope the traps you drew were good, because another problem with the deck is that it doesn't have a lot of recovery. I mean, it really doesn't. If you get down to like top decking, you're just going to lose every single time because you just don't have enough good top decks to actually draw. And yeah, you can play like Pot of Desires and Card of Demise. Pot of Desires probably isn't the worst idea ever, but I really dislike the Card of Demise variant just because you can't play a lot of hand traps then. I think hand traps are really crucial in this format. I'd rather play 6 hand traps than 3 Card of Demise, if that makes sense. But anyway, I think I've rambled on enough about the 3 decks I'm going to play. I really do just want your guys' advice in the comments below. There are benefits and downsides of all the decks on this list, and I don't even think any of these decks are particularly bad. I'm not talking about playing stuff like Crystal Beasts or Ice Berries or anything. I think all these decks really do have upsides, and I've proven, well, maybe not with Dinosaurs, but at least with Frogs and FAs, I've proven them to be somewhat good in much harder formats. And I know this is a YCS, so it's longer, but I think that all these decks do have the potential to be very powerful. And yeah, just give me your advice. Let me know what you guys think about the decks that I'm talking about here. And if you are at YCS Atlanta, feel free to say hi to me. I'll be walking around all weekend. I can sign your cards or give you a handshake or a high five. I have no idea. But yeah, I'll see you guys later. Bye.